Well, what can I tell you? This week's brought in a bumper crop. All I want to say is thank you, Guernsey. I got your message. Good to see you back on the island. Hoping that you're going to get down to a bit of graft soon. Looking forward to all those tasty morsels of work that you've promised me. Still waiting for Manchester to come online. Hope you get your broadband sorted out. But for the rest, had some real cracking replies to some of the exercises that I've set over the last couple of weeks. So I want to bunch them together. First of all, I mentioned earlier on that I didn't get much in the way of reply to my first week's stuff. Well, stuff did start coming in, as a matter of fact. I asked the question of why it is that the death rates from heart disease in the southern European countries should be so much less than in the northern European countries. And not surprisingly, the bulk of the replies that I got focused attention on diet. And I'm sure the diet's got a lot to do with it. You know, I am. You know, if the recommendation is that we eat 5 fruit and veg a day, then if you sit through an average meal in France, then you've done that in more or less one meal. You know that's true, because the French are incapable almost of eating a meal without a bit of salad attached to it. And when you go to France, you are struck, aren't you? You are struck by the degree to which you can spot children eating foods which in this country simply wouldn't put anywhere near them. You know, loads of green stuff on the plate for them. If you've ever had kids in Britain, you know what a tough time it is getting anything green anywhere near them, really. But I noticed normally when you put that question, why is it that the French people don't suffer, French in particular, don't suffer from heart disease in the same way as British people? It's usually diet that comes out. But what wasn't mentioned was red wine. You know, and there's a whole theory behind red wine, isn't there? There's a whole feeling that there's something in red wine which is cardioprotective, you know, and who knows? I mean, the one thing that you can't say about the French, of course, is that they smoke less, because if you go to France, it just seems as though everybody smoked by law. And when I was last in France, in fact, every time I go to France, I'm always struck by the degree to which men of my age strike me as being, frankly, smaller than me. And every time I go there, I wonder, is that because they smoke? You know, I mean, smoking is a notorious appetite suppressant. I mean, all, you know, size 0 models, they smoke, don't they? So I wonder if it's that. I mean, it can't be that the life in France is less stressful than in Britain. It doesn't strike you that way. Although my correspondent, talking about diet, also pointed to the fact that maybe it's having a sleep in the afternoon. Maybe that's it. You know, going home, having a lie down, having a leisurely dinner. But the other thing to say, I went to a conference once where somebody got up and he did a talk about the French paradox. And he was pointing out the fact that so few French people die from coronary artery disease. And how do you explain this? Is it garlic? Is it red wine? Is it the presence of fruit, veg, and fish in the diet? And then when he'd finished his talk, the chairman of the session said, "I think it's worthwhile pointing out that the average life expectancy in Britain is very little different to the average life expectancy in France. I think there's something like a year in it for men." So in other words, okay, French people don't die of heart disease, but they die 9 months later of something else. Is there something else? Is there something else necessarily better than the heart disease that we die of? Hard to say. Can't pretend I've got an answer to that one. I have also had correspondence about anatomy and physiology. I am glad to hear, madam, that this took you ages to do. But I thought that your replies were very comprehensive, very clear, and it was clear that you'd done an awful lot of work. I'm glad that you got up to speed on brain natriuretic peptides. I'm glad that you got to understand the function of the atrial appendage. Look here, can I just tell you this? When I start off with cardiac groups in class, and cardiac groups of nurses who are already qualified, I like to sucker everybody in by saying, who thinks that student nurses these days don't know enough anatomy and physiology? Almost everyone's hand goes up, and then I ask them, what is the function of the atrial appendage? And virtually nobody knows. And not just nobody knows, but it's more or less universally the case that nobody's ever heard of it. And yet it's a sort of important thing. Surgeons often cut it off in surgery because it causes trouble. So it's important that you know. I loved your answers about preload. I loved your answers about afterload. Well done, well done, well done. Can't say highly enough. And I will be looking forward to your replies next week. And Genzi, get cracking. Speak to you soon, everybody. Don't forget, keep in touch. Just email me with your ideas and your opinions, and it doesn't really matter how informal it is. Just keep the lines of communication open. Do little films like this on your webcam. Send them to me so I know what you look like. And we can all have a very amusing time. Speak to you soon. Bye now.